You are walking into your local big box grocery store on a random Tuesday evening. You only came in for 3 things, maybe a gallon of milk, some coffee creamer, and a pack of chicken thighs for dinner. It's supposed to be a 15-minute errand. But the second those automatic doors slide open, the energy in the building hits you. You can literally feel it humming in the fluorescent lights. People are moving just a little too fast. The carts are squeaking aggressively. You turn down the paper goods aisle and it looks like a bomb went off. The shelves are completely stripped bare, save for a few crushed boxes of the weird, expensive, eco-friendly tissues nobody actually likes. You look to your right, and there's a guy with a flatbed cart stacking literally 30 cases of bottled water. You look to your left, and a woman is throwing 10 massive jars of peanut butter into her cart with this frantic, wide-eyed stare. And suddenly, your chest gets tight. Your heart rate starts to tick up. You look down at your little handbasket with your milk and your chicken, and this cold, primal whisper sneaks into your brain. What do they know that I don't? Should I be buying water? Am I an idiot for not buying 50 rolls of toilet paper right now? Is the world ending on Thursday and nobody emailed me? I'm Karen. I think about money a lot and why it feels so different and so incredibly stressful for everyone right now. And honestly, watching human beings completely lose their minds in a grocery store is one of my deepest rabbit holes. Because when the world gets scary, our relationship with money and resources devolves into pure, unadulterated biology. Right now, in 2026, the world is undeniably scary. We are watching a massive geopolitical crisis unfold in the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz is functionally blocked. The price of a barrel of crude oil has violently spiked past $115, and the media is absolutely drowning us in apocalyptic headlines about shipping routes, inflation, and global collapse. So, naturally, what do? We panic. We run to the store and we hoard. We try to buy our way into a feeling of safety. But here is the brutal, deeply uncomfortable truth. You are panic buying the wrong things. You are completely misreading the economic environment, and by hoarding the wrong supplies, you aren't actually protecting your family. You're just lighting your hard-earned money on fire, handing it over to major corporations who are actively exploiting your anxiety. We need to stop. We need to take a massive, collective, deep breath and look at the actual math of this crisis. Because the threats to your household right now are very real, but they are not the threats you are preparing for. Today, we are going to dismantle the psychology of the panic buy. We are going to look at why your brain tricks you into making terrible financial decisions when you're scared. We're going to break down exactly what the current global oil shock actually threatens in our supply chain. And, most importantly, we are going to build a completely rational, math-based strategy for stocking your pantry so you can sleep at night without maxing out your credit cards. Let's get into the mechanics of fear. Before we can talk about what you should be buying, we have to understand why you are currently buying the wrong things. And to do that, we have to talk about herd mentality. Humans are pack animals. For thousands of years, our survival depended on looking at what the rest of the tribe was doing and copying it immediately. If you were gathering berries and suddenly the rest of your tribe dropped their baskets and started sprinting toward the trees, you didn't stand there and ask for peer-reviewed evidence of a lion. You just ran. The people who stopped to analyze the situation got eaten. The people who copied the herd survived to pass on their genetics. You and I are the descendants of the people who ran. We are hardwired for behavioral contagion. When you walk into that grocery store and you see an empty shelf where the flour usually is, your brain does not perform a rational macroeconomic analysis of global wheat yields. Your brain screams, lion. You see that other people have decided flour is valuable, and therefore you suddenly desire flour with an intensity that makes zero logical sense. I caught myself doing this a few weeks ago. I don't even bake. I literally buy bread at the bakery. But I saw 2 women fighting over the last 5-pound bag of all-purpose flour, and I caught myself thinking, should I intervene and grab that? What if I need to make sourdough in the apocalypse? It's completely absurd, but it is how we are programmed. When a crisis hits the news, like the current oil shocks and the war, that ambient anxiety primes us. We are already stressed. We are looking for an outlet for that stress. And the act of purchasing something, anything, gives us a tiny fleeting hit of dopamine. It gives us an illusion of control. You can't control the price of a barrel of Brent crude in London, but by God, you can control the inventory of canned peaches in your hall closet. But why does this matter to you financially? It matters because awareness is the only way to break the circuit. When you don't understand that your panic is a biological reflex, you mistake it for intuition. You think your gut is telling you to buy 50 cans of soup, when in reality, your amygdala is just malfunctioning because you watch too much cable news. The next time you feel that frantic, chest-tightening urge to fill your cart with things you didn't plan to buy, I want you to literally stop your cart in the aisle. Take your hands off the handle and say to yourself, am I buying this because I need it, or am I buying this because the shelf is empty? If the answer is the empty shelf, walk away. You are being played by your own biology.
There is another massive psychological trap we fall into during a crisis, and it explains why the specific things people hoard make absolutely no sense right now. In military strategy, there is a famous saying, generals always fight the last war. It means that we prepare for the crisis we just survived instead of analyzing the crisis we are currently in. Let's look at 2020. The defining trauma of that era was a global pandemic and physical lockdowns. We were trapped in our houses for months on end. So the things that became intensely valuable were the things you needed to physically survive inside your house without leaving. Toilet paper, hand sanitizer, cleaning wipes, and bottled water. Now look at 2026. What is the actual crisis right now? It is a geopolitical conflict in the Middle East that has shut down the Strait of Hormuz, causing the price of oil and natural gas to explode, which is deeply fracturing global shipping routes. But what are people doing? They are running to the store and hoarding toilet paper and bottled water. It is honestly baffling, but it makes perfect psychological sense. Our brains are lazy. When we feel crisis, we pull up the mental file labeled crisis and we follow the checklist from last time. We are blindly applying the survival tactics of a respiratory virus to a macroeconomic oil shock. Let me be incredibly blunt with you. A war in the Middle East does not mean your local municipal water treatment plant is going to suddenly shut off. You do not need to max out a credit card buying pallets of Aquafuma. The tap is still going to work. Furthermore, a spike in the price of diesel fuel does not mean the world is going to run out of toilet paper. Trees are still growing in North America. The paper mills in Canada and the US are still operating. Yes, the cost to transport that toilet paper to your local store is going up because diesel is expensive, so the price of the toilet paper will rise. But the physical supply is not going to vanish the way it did during the lockdown hoarding of 2020. When you hoard water and paper goods right now, you are fighting the last war. You are tying up your precious limited cash reserves in heavy, bulky items that are completely irrelevant to the actual economic threat at your doorstep. You are building a bunker for a hurricane when the actual threat is a slow-burning financial drought. You have to look at the board as it exists today, not as it existed 6 years ago. Stop prepping for lockdowns and start prepping for hyperinflation on petroleum-adjacent goods. So if water and toilet paper are the wrong things to worry about, what are the right things? Where are the actual vulnerabilities in the 2026 supply chain? To figure this out, we have to follow the oil. The crisis right now is energy. It is crude oil and it is natural gas. Therefore, the things that are going to become scarce or astronomically expensive are the things that rely heavily on oil and gas to be created or transported. Let's talk about fertilizer. I know it's not exactly a sexy topic, but it is the single most important macroeconomic factor for your grocery budget right now. Modern commercial agriculture is entirely dependent on synthetic nitrogen fertilizers to produce massive crop yields. Do you know how we make synthetic nitrogen fertilizer? We use natural gas. It is the core ingredient in the Haber-Bosch chemical process that literally keeps billions of people on this planet fed. When the war caused energy markets to panic, the price of natural gas shot up. Instantly, the cost to manufacture fertilizer exploded. Fertilizer plants in Europe have had to curtail production because they literally cannot afford the natural gas required to run their facilities. What happens when fertilizer becomes incredibly expensive? Farmers buy less of it. They plant fewer crops. The yield per acre drops. This means that months from now, when the current planting season gets harvested, there is going to be a massive global shortage of cheap grain, wheat, corn, rice, soybeans. And because corn and soy are what we feed to livestock, a shortage of grain immediately translates to a massive price spike for meat, dairy, and eggs. That is your real vulnerability. It's not that the store will run out of toilet paper. It's that a 20-pound bag of rice might cost 3 times what it did last year, and a pound of ground beef might become a luxury item. The second vulnerability is anything packaged in heavy plastic. Plastics are petrochemicals. They are directly derived from crude oil. As oil hits $115 to $120 a barrel, the cost of manufacturing every single plastic bottle, shrink-wrap film, and clamshell container skyrockets. So anything heavily processed and heavily packaged, your frozen dinners, your snack foods, your convenience meals, is going to see a massive packaging tax layered onto its price. The third vulnerability is anything imported from across an ocean. Because the Red Sea and Suez Canal are effectively war zones, commercial shipping is taking the long route around the tip of Africa. This adds weeks to the journey and burns millions of extra gallons of diesel fuel. If an item in your grocery store comes from Asia, India, or parts of Europe, think imported spices, specialty oils, electronics, certain medications, or off-season produce, it is going to get hit with a brutal shipping surcharge. When you understand the mechanics of the current crisis, your panic stops being irrational and starts becoming strategic. You stop looking at the bottled water and you start looking at the dry goods and the cooking oils.
Now we need to talk about the financial math of hoarding, because this is where people completely destroy their own lives while trying to save them. I have a friend, we'll call him Dave, who is a classic anxious prepper. Whenever the news gets bad, Dave opens his laptop and starts buying survival gear. During the last scare, he bought 3 of those massive plastic survival buckets full of freeze-dried stroganoff and powdered eggs. They cost him about $250 each. He also bought a generator, extra fuel cans, and a bunch of other tactical gear. In total, he spent about $1,500 in one panicked weekend. And how did he pay for it? He put it on his credit card, a credit card with a 24% annual interest rate. Let me explain the concept of opportunity cost, because it is the silent killer in the panic buying equation. Every dollar you spend has a job. When you assign a dollar to buy a bucket of freeze-dry food that will sit in your basement for 10 years, that dollar can no longer do any other job for you. Dave tied up $1,500 of his liquidity in survival food. Meanwhile, he was carrying a balance on his credit card. Because the Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates incredibly high to fight the inflation caused by this exact oil crisis, Dave's credit card company is bleeding him dry. At 24% interest, that $1,500 panic purchase is costing him an absolute fortune every single month in pure interest payments. It is making his daily life harder to afford. It is actively making him poorer. This is the profound irony of panic buying. People are so terrified of an abstract future doomsday, the idea that the grocery stores will close and society will collapse, that they actively trigger their own personal financial doomsday right now in the present. The bank does not care if you have 50 pounds of rice in your garage. If you cannot make your minimum payments because you spent all your cash on hoarding, they will tank your credit score. They will send your accounts to collections. You will not lose your house to an invading army. You will lose your house to foreclosure because you misallocated your capital during an economic shock. Right now, in a high inflation, high interest rate environment, cash is your oxygen, liquidity is your shield. Paying down your variable interest debt is the greatest prepping you can possibly do.
If you have $500 to spare, do not buy a pallet of canned beans. Put that $500 towards your highest interest credit card. Lowering your monthly debt obligations gives you the financial agility to absorb the higher cost of groceries later. A basement full of supplies you don't actually eat is a liability. A zero-balance credit card is true survival. There is another deeply cynical reason you should never participate in a panic buy. You are essentially volunteering to pay the absolute highest possible price for a good, simply for the privilege of being terrified. I call it the fear premium. Retailers are incredibly sophisticated operations. They track inventory velocity, how fast an item is moving off the shelf, in real time. The algorithms running the pricing models at massive grocery chains and online retailers like Amazon are designed to maximize profit based on demand. When a panic starts and people begin clearing out an aisle, the algorithm notices instantly. And what does the algorithm do? It immediately eliminates all discounts, sales, and promotional pricing for that item. Let's say a 20-pound bag of rice normally costs $15, and they frequently run a promotion where it drops to $12. When the panic buying starts, not only does that $12 promotion disappear forever, but the baseline price might algorithmically surge to $18, then $20, then $25 as inventory dwindles. When you rush to the store along with the rest of the herd, you are buying at the absolute peak of the demand curve. You are paying peak prices. You are actively bidding against your neighbors for a product, driving the cost up for everyone, and handing that massive profit margin directly to the corporation. And the worst part? Corporations know this. They love a good panic. I listen to corporate earnings calls, and executives will use polite, sanitized business language to describe this, but what they are really saying is, consumer anxiety creates incredible pricing power for our brands. They know that when you are scared, you stop looking at the price tag, you stop calculating the unit price per ounce, you stop caring about the generic store brand versus the premium name brand. You just grab whatever's left on the shelf, throw it in your cart, and swipe your card, completely numb to the financial damage. Panic buying is essentially a voluntary tax you pay to corporate America. It is a massive wealth transfer from the middle class, who are acting entirely out of emotional fear, to the shareholder class, who are acting purely on mathematical opportunity. If you want to survive this crisis, you have to refuse to pay the fear premium. You have to be the person who walks into the store, sees the chaos, looks at the $25 bag of rice, and calmly says, "No, I am not playing this game today." Patience is a financial weapon. The panic always subsides. The supply chains, even in a crisis, eventually adjust and restock. If you can wait out the emotional peak of the herd, you will save yourself a fortune. Okay, so I have spent the last few minutes yelling at you about what not to do. I've told you not to hoard water, not to buy useless survival gear, and not to participate in the herd mentality. But I'm not telling you to do nothing. I am actually a massive advocate for being prepared. But we have to do it rationally. We have to build what I call the strategic reserve. The strategic reserve is not a bunker. It is not an apocalyptic fantasy. It is a highly calculated roll-in inventory of goods designed specifically to insulate your household budget from the inflation and supply chain shocks caused by the oil crisis. Here is the exact framework for building it. Rule 1. Only buy what you actually eat. This is the golden rule. Do not buy weird, freeze-dried survival food that tastes like salted cardboard. Do not buy MREs. Do not buy 50 cans of Spam if your family hates Spam. If the crisis passes and prices stabilize, you do not want to be stuck with $400 worth of food that you have to force feed your children. You should only stockpile the normal, everyday ingredients your family already consumes on a weekly basis. You are just buying them further in advance. Rule 2. Focus on the fertilizer, diesel vulnerabilities. Remember what we talked about earlier. Look for the items that will be hit hardest by the natural gas and shipping shocks. You want to stock up on dry grains, rice, oats, pasta, dried beans, and lentils. These are heavily dependent on fertilizer and fuel to harvest and transport. They have an incredibly long shelf life, and right now, they're still relatively cheap. You want to stock up on cooking oils, olive oil, vegetable oil, avocado oil. Oil production and shipping are highly vulnerable to the current crisis. You want to stock up on shelf-stable proteins, canned tuna, canned chicken, peanut butter. As grain prices rise, fresh meat prices will explode. Having a robust supply of cheap, shelf-stable protein is the ultimate budget shock absorber. Rule 3. Avoid the convenience trap. Do not stockpile heavily processed convenience foods. Do not fill your pantry with frozen pizzas, pre-made microwave meals, or heavily packaged snacks. As we discussed, these items have a massive packaging tax and diesel tax built into them. They are wildly inefficient. You are paying a premium for the plastic and the factory labor. If you want to survive a high inflation environment, you have to stockpile ingredients, not meals. You stockpile flour, sugar, yeast, and salt, not a $7 box of frozen garlic bread. You are trading a little bit of your time and labor in the kitchen to protect your wealth. Rule 4. The rolling inventory system. You do not build the strategic reserve all at once. You do not max out a credit card on a Tuesday. You build it slowly. Every time you go to the grocery store for your normal weekly shopping, you allocate an extra $10 or $20 to the reserve. If you need 1 jar of peanut butter for the week, you buy 2. You put the new one in the back of the pantry, and you eat the old one. This is called first in, first out. You are essentially creating a 2 to 3 month buffer between your kitchen and the global supply chain. When the news announces that shipping lanes are completely halted and the price of pasta is going to double next week, you don't panic. You don't have to run to the store and fight the herd. You just look in your pantry, see your 3-month supply of pasta that you bought at last year's prices, and you calmly make dinner. You have successfully insulated your household from the macroeconomics of the crisis. I want to pivot for a second because there is an emotional component to this that we often ignore. When we talk about prepping or survival, we have a very physical bias. We think about tangible things. We think about pantries full of food, generators, medical kits, and batteries. We want things we can touch because holding a physical object makes our primate brains feel secure. But in the modern digital economy of 2026, physical objects are often liabilities disguised as assets. If you lose your job because the economy dips into a recession caused by the oil shock, your landlord does not accept canned beans as rent. Your mortgage company does not care how many rolls of toilet paper you have in your guest bathroom. The electric company will not barter for your extra bottles of shampoo. The ultimate survival skill in a financial crisis is not hoarding, it is agility. Agility means having options, and in our society, options are dictated entirely by your liquidity and your debt-to-income ratio. The most prepared person in your neighborhood is not the guy with the survival bunker full of MREs. The most prepared person is the woman who drives a paid-off 10-year-old Honda Civic, has 0 credit card debt, and has 3 months of living expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account. She is agile. If inflation drives her grocery bill up by $200 a month, she can absorb it because she doesn't have a $600 car payment. If her company does layoffs, she can pivot and take a slightly lower paying job without losing her house because her monthly overhead is incredibly low. When you panic buy, you destroy your agility. You take your most versatile, powerful survival tool, cash, and you trap it in physical depreciating goods. You become heavy. You become inflexible. I want you to reframe how you look at preparedness. Every time you pay an extra $100 toward your credit card principal, you are prepping. Every time you negotiate a lower rate on your car insurance and put the difference in a savings account, you are prepping. Every time you learn a new skill that makes you more employable, you are prepping. You are building a fortress that cannot be touched by supply chain logistics or shipping delays. The world wants you to feel out of control. The news wants you terrified. The corporations want you frantic and spending. The best possible rebellion you can stage right now is to become deeply, unshakably financially boring. I know you're exhausted. We all are. It feels like we barely caught our breath from the last historic, once-in-a-lifetime crisis, and now we're being told to brace for impact all over again. It is profoundly unfair that you have to carry the weight of global geopolitical conflicts every time you try to budget for your family's groceries. You have every right to feel angry when you walk down those aisles and see the prices climbing while the packages get smaller. But you cannot let that anger turn into panic. Panic is exactly what the system is hoping for. When you run with the herd, you get slaughtered with the herd. You pay the highest prices, you buy the wrong things, and you drain the very resources you actually need to survive the long game. Take a step back. Look at the reality of the math. The water is not going to shut off. The world is not ending on Thursday. What is actually happening is a slow, methodical squeeze on the middle class driven by oil prices and corporate greed. You cannot control the Strait of Hormuz, but you have absolute control over the four walls of your house. You can stop fighting the last war. You can ignore the empty shelves of paper goods and calmly, strategically stockpile the dry goods and proteins that will actually protect your budget. You can aggressively attack your variable interest debt to buy yourself the agility you need. The next time you walk into that big box store and you feel the hum of the fluorescent lights and the frantic energy of the crowd, I want you to be the calmest person in the building. I want you to look at the people frantically loading their carts with water, feel a brief moment of empathy for their fear, and then calmly walk right past them. You know the math now. You know the strategy. You are not going to be a victim of the fear premium. Take a breath. Check your unit prices. Build your strategic reserve slowly. Protect your cash. You have the tools to navigate this. You really do. Stay rational, stay defensive, and don't let them profit off your panic.